Chris Graham here with Rod Mullins. We're going to talk some more about the NASCAR team charter controversy. We've been talking about this issue a lot, Rod, for the last several months. Last week, we discussed the news from the previous week about the deadline deal. The team's just given a few hours to review this lengthy document and sign it or else. Most everybody did, a couple didn't. Those who did don't seem happy with it. Dale Earnhardt Jr. on his podcast this week expressing surprise that as many teams signed as did. This isn't going away, Rod. I mean, this is an issue that's going to still be out there for a while.
Yeah, it's still going to be out there. And I think that the best description of it was, of course, Michael Jordan in 2311 Motorsports there with Denny Hamlin. They didn't sign. And Bob Jenkins with Front Row Motorsports, they did not sign either. And there were reasons. One of the things you alluded to there at the beginning of it was all the teams were handed a 105-page document, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe a few pages short or a few more pages than what it should have been. But they were still given this document and expected to read this and sign it before midnight. That's a problem in and of itself. I don't know of very many marriages that go through something like that, and they go through a divorce of where they get there and they say, okay, you've got until midnight to sign this. If not, you're still going to be married. If you do sign it, then the divorce is final. I mean, I don't know how you can do that. But Bob Jenkins of Front Row Motorsports, they talked with him in the garage, or at least the guys from Kicking the Tires talked to him on Saturday in Atlanta. And one of his things was that he felt like that with all this thing going on with the charters, it was frustrating, but every team does what's best for them. We haven't had that many discussions with NASCAR. That's according to Jenkins. So I really don't know how far apart we are. Financially, it's going to be tough for sure, racing without a charter. But he thinks more than anything else, this kind of put them, also 2311 Motorsports, well, matter of fact, the rest of the teams out there, it was kind of unreasonable. And it kind of put them in a position where they just didn't want to be in that kind of position. And it's bad when the situation calls for it. And then you get the quote coming out of Rick Hendrick, and Rick Hendrick says, I'm tired of all this. And he signs the charter. That's the thing that surprised me. I thought, okay, Rick Hendrick will know, but some of these guys are just tired of it. They are tired of this thing going on. And it's sort of the thing like, hey, you pay this much alimony, you're going to have to pay it. This is what you're going to have to. Go ahead, let's pay it. But it hurts the teams. It's going to hurt the teams in the long run. And there you go again with that thing of, the revenue sharing and so forth. NASCAR is going to be the one that gobbles all this stuff up and then leaves the crumbs to the race teams. And I think there needs to be a little bit more of a well-balanced meal there on the table put in front of the owners and also NASCAR both.
Now, Rod, you've talked in the past and a lot this season about the maybe outsized role that Dale Earnhardt Jr. plays now as sort of an ambassador for the sport.
Mm-hmm.
So when he says something, a lot of folks hear it and pay attention to it. On his Dale Jr. download last week, here's the quote. I thought the teams would hold out longer. I guess I was a bit surprised that they signed. Didn't see that coming, but I felt the teams would hold out longer. Apparently, the message was clear from NASCAR to these teams that signed this deal: take it or leave it.
Yeah.
He's saying there, I mean, in his opinion, they shouldn't have signed, and I just wonder. So he comes across as a neutral observer. He's sort of like Switzerland, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he's calling him out. He's calling out NASCAR, the ownership there. That's that. I don't. What role do you think that plays when a guy like Dale Jr. is outspoken?
It puts him and his sister Kelly in a position of whether or not they're going to be able to make it to the Cup Series, because that's been a thing that a lot of people have been saying, hey, why don't you go and why don't you take your team and go to the Cup Series? You've been successful in the Xfinity Series. Why don't you just go to the Cup? And he says there's a lot more to it than that. Well, this is part of it. There is a lot more to it than that. And he feels like that the charters are just too expensive. There's just way too much money. You and I have talked about how much it costs for one of these race teams to run in a year and how much they have to have. I don't know how some of these teams, like, for example, Hendrick. I know that Rick Hendrick has a car dealership. It's known, nationwide and everything. The advertising for HendrickCars.com is on the side of Kyle Larson's car. That's where he's made his money at. But still, he's also made money in NASCAR. But he will also be the first to tell you, sometimes it's either cut the bait and run and get out of it and pull out, or put everything you've got into it. And he has put everything he's had into it, but it's gotten rougher over the years. I think we talked about it earlier about the money that Hooters owns Rick Hendrick right now, and they are going to court over that because it's one of those things of where that money should have been there, and they didn't have that money in place, and they hadn't paid money. So therefore, what choice do they have? They've got to go and file for it and get it through the court system. So it's rough for all these teams. Don't think for a minute that these teams are running away with it and they're all making money. The drivers are making money. And I'm going to say honestly how the drivers are making money. And that's through endorsements and different things like that. And also, what they have to pay. But that is another race team expenditure right there. You have to be able to pay that guy. Is that driver that talented? What about your crew? What about your pit crew and everything? Do you just give them scraps and then do you give the driver everything? Well, yeah, but if you don't have a good enough car week in and week out, that goes on the crew. And if you don't have a good enough car to run toward the front, then it's the driver. So it's a kind of an imbalance almost, so to speak, in the way that we look at things on the scale.
I can see from a business standpoint. All right, so if you're Rick Hendrick, I can see how you make money, even though you lose money in NASCAR because
Right.
every team owner loses money in NASCAR. We know that already because they're out there. It costs 40 million per car per season to keep them on the track. Uh, if you have a two or three race team, 80 to 120 million dollars. Just to get out there on the track, and you don't, and you got to raise all this money from sponsors and everything else. So if you're Rick Hendrick, at least people you will hope that people see HendrickMotorsports.com on the car, and
Mm-hmm.
then you see they run well on Saturday and Sunday, and people come in on Monday. The old saying about NASCAR,
Yep.
they run well on Sunday, the people come in on buying on Monday. Uh, and so people will be buying, they can buy a car from, any dealer, but if you want that Rick Hendrick Motorsports tag on the back of your car, you got to buy it from him, one
Right.
of his dealerships. So I can see that. But if you're 2311 Racing and you're Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin, you don't have side businesses that can benefit from the
No.
attention that, and you go down the line of other NASCAR team owners, and they don't have that, that don't have ancillary ways to make money
Mm-hmm.
off of being in NASCAR. You're not going to make enough money selling T-shirts and hats to
No.
justify all the effort that goes in. So yeah, that's what I can't figure out for the life of me why a lot of these, except for wow, a lot of these team owners are in NASCAR, except for the fact they just want to be competitive. But at some point, maybe that's just not enough justification because it takes a lot to just not lose money and not lose money hand over fist in NASCAR.
Yeah, and I'm still at this same thing too. Of I'm asking the question about this next generation car. It was supposed to save money, but yet the cost incurred with all these teams and stuff and everything, that's another factor you have to weigh in with that car. You have to get a specific engine. You have to run with that specific engine. You make changes. That was a question somebody put up the other night. I noticed on one of the forums, somebody asking the question, why is it that the engines are always blurred out on television? Or why is it the telemetry screens are, kind of blurred out when they're on TV and so forth? They just don't, hey, they don't want people to know what's going on. They don't want people to know the engine. They don't want to, see all this stuff because it's almost like NASCAR's making this proprietary. They're wanting to hold on to it. They don't want anybody else, like I said before, many times to friends and so forth, the day of what we know of as the weekend grease monkey is over, and it's over in NASCAR right now. It's not like you can go and pull that car back into the pits and in 15 minutes put something else through it and run it a little bit faster than what it's supposed to by adjusting the computer. If you do it, then you're going to get caught, and then everybody else, they're going to say, well, hey, if it can be done, why can't we do this? And then that's where they put it all in front of everybody and say, let's make this an even playing field. But that's what racing's all about. Racing in one way, one degree or another. We've had this conversation before. If you're not cheating, you're not really racing. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but that's the way I look at it.
Like SEC football. If
Well,
you're not,
it's another one too. So
if you're not cheating, you're not trying. As we wrap this up, we've talked about 2311 and front row were the two holdouts. Any word, any inkling from anywhere as to what they're going to do and what NASCAR is going to do if they don't sign?
Well, Jenkins said more than anything else, I think, in his quotes, he said, I've been doing this about 17 years. And he says he's become friends with Steve Phelps and Steve O'Donnell. And he says, we'll figure it out. Hopefully, he says, it'll be fine. I'm not concerned about it. Well, that kind of scares me too to hear him say, well, I'm not going to sign it, but I'm not that concerned about it. So they're going to work something out there the way at least he looks at it that way. Jenkins also added that he believes that other teams that had reservations about this whole thing signing had their own reasons for not holding out, like front row in 2311. But he said that for them, they're in the market to buy a third charter for their organizations. Both of those teams are. Now, reports on the current cost around the charters, get this, $25 million apiece. Wow. And three Stewart-Haas racing charters going on the block at the end of the season. So right there, 25 million apiece, three of them. Wow. That's a boatload of money for somebody to get a hold of.
Yeah, yeah, and then have to fund the team to be on the track
Yep.
every week too. So yeah, that's a pretty amount of money. Well, okay, so for those who've watched, thank you for doing so. We are of course we covered the race in Watkins Glen on a different video. Rod also got you ready for Bristol this weekend. Rod, you're going to be in Bristol this weekend. We look forward to your coverage from there as well. So for those who are following along on the video here, just go to AugustaFreePress.com to get the latest. Rod has a story on AFP recapping the race from Watkins Glen, and we'll get you ready for Bristol, and then we'll of course have the coverage from down there. The Xfinity race on Friday night, the Cup Series playoff race on Saturday night. Well, Rod, as always, thank you for your time and your insight.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thank you.